Rules Committee come to order. Good afternoon, and welcome to each of you for joining us today as we consider H.R. 427, the regulations from the Executive in Need of Security Act of 2015, also known as the REINS Act. The REINS Act requires that a joint resolution of approval must be passed by both chambers of Congress and signed by the President before any new major rule or regulation from the executive branch may take place. The total cost of executive regulations are estimated to exceed $1.8 trillion, or 11% of our GDP. Small businesses are struggling to keep up with the cost of executive compliance, which is why we need to provide them, I believe, with certainty they need to grow their jobs and to create more jobs. When I'm back in Dallas, Texas, my constituents frequently express their frustration with the growing number of costly rules and regulations that unnecessarily interfere with economic expansion and job growth. Many times they point to federal rules and regulations that take more time to hire staff rather than employees who will help to grow the business. They want Congress to check this abuse of power from the executive branch. I think it is an abuse. I think it can become abusive, and I think it is abusive. So I happen to agree that the Obama administration's abuse of executive rulemaking has gone way too far, which is why I'm glad to see this bill appear today. I want to thank Congressman Tom Marino from the 10th Congressional District of Pennsylvania, who's here on behalf of the Judiciary Committee. Joining him today also is Hank Johnson, who is from the committee, and I want to welcome them to the Rules Committee. I think that when you look at what occurs with unchecked rules and regulations as opposed to a relationship with Congress, one which is well vetted, which the American people can understand, it makes more common sense. Before I defer to our two guests today, I want to defer to the gentleman from Massachusetts for any opening statement he would choose to make. Gentlemen,
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for the record, I want to insert in the record a statement kind of debunking the Crane report, which the chairman referred to. Even the Congressional Research Service has kind of debunked the report. And again, I know we're all trying to make political points here, but I think that report is not based on science or the kind of analysis that I think we would use to make sound decisions on these issues. And again, I think this bill is more about politics than it is about scientific judgment. And I, regret that we're here again. This is I think the third time we're here on the REINS Act, and it's kind of getting boring. It's kind of like bringing up the Affordable Care Act repeal on a constant basis. I'm not for regulation that doesn't make any sense, but I think this thing here is, in my opinion, is not worth our time. And when we need it, we need a highway bill. We need to pass immigration reform. We need to get our appropriations work done. I mean, we have a whole bunch of things that need to be done that I think we could work out a deal between the House and the Senate and get somebody to the White House to actually make a difference in people's lives, and we're doing this. And so with that, I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. I would note that there are lots of things that are empirical evidence to suggest that, in fact, rules and regulations do harm job creation and harm business. And I would point to perhaps some resurgencies that are underway in states all across this country where the people who are against rules and regulations are making a comeback because I believe that rules and regulations have gone too far. We could look at a case study called Texas as a prime example, Exhibit A, about where jobs, freedom, lack of taxes, rules and regulations flourish, and yet we have an unparalleled amount of jobs, creativity, private jobs, entrepreneurship, and future. And so I would hope that my colleagues would want to take a look at that as an opportunity for their places that might be in the snow belt, rust belt, or other places to be able to look at a way to do this. And I know that that's what we do here in Washington, D.C. I'm an advocate of the free enterprise system and for unlimited growth and opportunity, and I want to thank the gentleman from Massachusetts for his counterbalance to my argument, and I'm delighted today that we have the gentleman, Mr. Marino, a dear friend of mine from Pennsylvania, Mr. Johnson, a good friend of this committee. He is up here on a regular basis. Welcome to both of you. Without objection, anything you have in writing will be entered into the record as it relates to your testimony here. Mr. Marino, I know you're representing the gentleman, Mr. Goodlatte, from the Judiciary Committee, and I spoke to Bob and knew that his appearance today was in jeopardy, and I'm delighted that you're here. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Sessions, for the opportunity to testify today regarding H.R. 427, the regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny Act of 2015, also known as the REINS Act, and it's a pleasure to be sitting before the rest of the committee as well. H.R. 427 was introduced by Mr. Young of Indiana. The Judiciary Committee ordered H.R. 427 favorably reported with an amendment on April 15, 2015. Mr. Chairman, the need for this legislation to help create jobs and achieve full economic recovery is clear. Economic growth is the key to job creation and recovery. But America's growth rate has been historically anemic throughout the Obama administration. The lack of strong growth translates into deep economic pain for America's workers and families. In the June 2015 jobs report, the number of unemployed workers, workers who can only find part-time jobs, and workers who are now only marginally attached to the labor force stood at 10.8%. They number over 16 million Americans. Americans' labor force participation rate remains at lows not seen since the Carter administration. Median household income still is below the level achieved before the financial crisis. It is the Obama administration's policies that are responsible for America still remaining so deep in this economic hole. To see how true that is, one only has to look at the contrast with the recovery Ronald Reagan achieved. 4.5 years after the recession began in 1981, the Reagan administration, through policies opposite to the Obama administration's, had achieved a recovery that created 7.8 million more jobs than when the recession began. Real median household income, meanwhile, rose by 7.7%. Surely the administration knows this. But instead of fixing the problem by changing its policies, the Obama administration knows only one response: double down, increase taxes, increase spending, and increase regulation. To help turn our economy around, the REINS Act focuses on major regulation with costs over $100 million. The number of these new major regulations the Obama administration has issued and plans to issue is without modern precedent. Testimony before the Judiciary Committee during the 112th and 113th Congresses has plainly shown the connection between skyrocketing levels of regulation and declining levels of jobs and growth. To make matters worse, it is increasingly the case that when Congress refuses to enable the administration's flawed policies through legislation, the administration unilaterally issues new regulations to achieve an end run around Congress. The REINS Act is one of the most important, powerful measures we can adopt to put an end to regulation that wrong-headedly imposes the administration's flawed policies on American people. It achieves that result in the simplest and clearest of ways by requiring an up or down vote by the people's representatives in Congress before any new major regulation can be imposed on our economy. The REINS Act provides to members of Congress who are accountable to the American people an additional check against the Obama administration's costliest regulatory decisions when those regulations are needlessly complicated or burdensome. This regulation will help reverse the one-way cost ratchet turned by the Obama administration and Washington's regulatory bureaucrats. I request that the Rules Committee grant an appropriate rule that allows for expeditious consideration of H.R. 427. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marino. I appreciate you being here. Ms. Johnson, welcome. We're delighted that you're for the Rules Committee. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. It's wonderful
Yes,
to
sir.
be here, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for your graciousness during this particular hearing, as well as all hearings. And I didn't come prepared to discuss economics today, but I will say that I think it's the 65th straight month of positive job growth that has been experienced by America under the Obama administration. 65 straight months compared to the Bush administration, where I think there was net job decline each and every month of that administration, which was over an 8-year period. So it's a remarkable and astounding recovery that has occurred in our economy despite unprecedented opposition by the opposing party. But having said that, I speak in opposition to H.R. 427, the Regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny Act of 2015, or the REINS Act, and ask that the committee make in order my amendment, which would exempt from H.R. 427 all rules that the Office of Management and Budget determines would result in net job creation. H.R. 427 would amend the Congressional Review Act to require that both houses of Congress pass and the President sign a joint resolution of approval within 70 legislative days before any major rule issued by an agency can take effect. Additionally, H.R. 427 imposes deadlines for the enactment of a joint resolution approving a major rule that could charitably be referred to as Byzantine. Under new Section 802, the House may only consider a major rule on the second and fourth Thursday of each month. Last year, there were only 13 such days on the legislative calendar, compared to the 80 major rules adopted in 2014. And by the way, so many rules had to be drafted and implemented to make sure that we did not repeat the scenario of the Great Recession, which even Alan Greenspan gave an opinion about as being too unregulated. It was due to lack of regulation that the Great Recession occurred as opposed to too much regulation. But under the new Section 801, Congress may only consider such resolutions within 70 legislative days of receiving a major rule. This congressional red tape would threaten to end rulemaking as we know it. Even if agencies reduced the number of major rules in contemplation of the bill's onerous requirements, Congress would still lack the expertise and policy justifications for refusing to adopt a major rule. As over 80 of the nation's leading professors on environmental and administrative law have noted in a letter, without this expertise, any, quote, disapproval is therefore more likely to reflect the political power of special interest, a potential that would be magnified in light of the fast-track process, end quote. Lastly, by flipping the process for agency rulemaking so that Congress can simply avoid or simply void implementation by not acting on a major rule, the REINS Act likely violates the presentment and bicameralism requirements of Article 1 of the Constitution. As Professor Ron Levin, a leading expert on administrative law, noted during a hearing on the REINS Act last Congress, quote, "The reality is that the act is intended to enable a single House of Congress to control the implementation of the laws through the rulemaking process. Such a scheme transgresses the very idea of separation of powers under which the Constitution entrusts the writing of the laws to the legislative branch and the implementation of the laws to the executive branch," end quote. Indeed, as the Supreme Court observed in the landmark case INS versus Shada, quote, The Constitution does not contemplate an active role for Congress in the supervision of officers charged with the execution of laws it enacts, end quote. The court also clarified that it was, quote, profound conviction of the framers that the powers conferred on Congress were the powers to be mostly carefully circumscribed by providing that no law could take effect without the concurrence of both the prescribed majority, no law could take effect without the concurrence of the prescribed majority of the members of both houses. The framers reemphasized their belief that legislation should not be enacted unless it has been carefully and fully considered by the nation's elected officials, end quote. I strongly urge and encourage my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to oppose H.R. 427, and I ask that my amendment be made in order, and I thank the chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. And I appreciate both of you being here. Mr. Marino, evidently we've come to a disagreement about what regulation is and is not about. And I would say to you that your committee, a number of people have been up here and talked about a proper use of rules and regulations that's based upon sound science, that is based upon the opportunity to understand what rules and regulations are being promulgated on them. Can you tell me your best example or an example about a rule and regulation that we would be talking about today that would have taken place, that did take place, that would have been required to go through simply a better process that this bill, in fact, would do today?
Certainly, Chairman. I have several, but I can give you two very simple explanations. I, of course, go around my district, talk to many businesses, but I speak around the state of Pennsylvania and around the United States. And I consistently hear from business owners, whether it's a mom and pop operation on the corner or a major manufacturing facility, that if they had if they would not have to spend the time and money in filling out paperwork, much of it duplicative, to send to the federal government, they could invest that money into expanding their business and hiring people. And let me give you an example. Small town bank in my district gives loans for moderately priced homes in the area, which are not very expensive compared to the general scheme of homes today. Car loans, loans to build a bathroom on their house or to do some repairs to the work on their home. The banker brought in a stack of documents well over a foot high that pertain to a company that wants to come in and borrow $200 million. The next stack that he brought in was a woman who wanted to purchase a car, and the stack was the same height in the amount of paper that had to be filled out to purchase that car. She threw her hands up in the air and said, "I'm not going through this." She didn't purchase the car. Another example I can give you is a gentleman who owns a small grocery store. He had just had his bread loaded into his building on a dock. And an inspector came through and everything passed. But when the driver who didn't work for the store pulled the racks of bread out and stood them beside on the dock, the driver left without shutting the dock door. The inspector came over and wrote out a complaint against the store owner, and the store owner asked him why he was doing that, and he simply said, "Because I can." Now, first of all, we're dealing with people who, I was in law enforcement for 18 years, and I respect any type of law enforcement or authority. But this, and I've been told this on several occasions, these are the kinds of people who have a little authority that go to an extreme, but also the regulations that are submitted out there just go well beyond what is the intent of running a business, running a government the way it should be. And this just doesn't pertain to this administration and Democrats. Congress over the past 50 years has given so much of its authority over to the executive branch that it has to come back to Congress. And we're supposed to be separate, three equal separate departments, agencies in government, three branches of government. I don't see anything wrong with the people having a say as to what regulations are put into effect and what regulations aren't put into effect, particularly when today we don't pay attention to the long-term cost and what it does to destroy businesses.
Thank you very much. Mr. Johnson, you said you didn't come prepared. I didn't either, to talk economics. I did not. I did not bring the facts and figures. But just off the top of your head, do you know what the unemployment is for African Americans in the United States?
It's double that for Caucasian Americans, which is troubling, and it's largely due to the lack of sufficient rules and regulations to guard against racial discrimination in employment.
Is that right?
It is. And it's a problem that, it's a systemic problem here in America. I mean, you know, rules and regulations that would prescribe the conduct of officers as they police urban areas in America is a problem. The lack of regulations, the lack of rules and regulations and protections under the laws has operated to cause African Americans and other people of color, and women also, minorities, to be kept behind when it comes to the economic prosperity that we all should enjoy. So as far as leveling the playing field and creating a set of rules that everyone has to abide by, I think that's what government is about. And when there are no rules, then we find that those who are not favored, those who are out of favor, end up getting the short end of the stick, and that legacy continues for generations and for centuries. And so it's something that I think we have to all admit that is the case, and we have to work on trying to make sure that the playing field is level, so that all can enjoy economic prosperity in this country, not just the wealthy, not just those who were born into with a silver spoon, but those who honestly seek to work hard and play by the rules. They deserve to be able to prosper as well.
Yes, sir. Well, look, I don't want to sit here and beat up your testimony. That's not what I'm about. I disagree with you, but what I would say to you is that President Obama promulgated over 150 major rules and regulations. You say there are none that would protect the worker, at least African American or women workers in the marketplace. 150 major regulations, which had a cost of over $70 billion. In contrast, since first-term President George W. Bush promulgated 52 major regulations at a cost of $15 billion. I just can't believe that there are none of these marketplace provisions to protect African Americans and women, and I am disappointed to hear today that there are none. Mrs. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Mr. McGovern pointed out, we have dealt with this bill before in the past. I'm a strong supporter of our reining in the increasing number of rules and regulations being put out by the executive branch and establishing a proper constitutional balance between our responsibilities and responsibilities of the executive branch. Bill I got passed earlier in the year, the unfunded mandates bill, I think is a very good bill that helps with this. So I support very much what's being proposed here, and I have in the past. And I thank our colleague for being here. And like you, disagree with Mr. Johnson on where we should be going. So thank you very much. I yield back.
Yes, ma'am. Gentleman from Massachusetts recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just like to ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the statement of administration policy, which says that the president, were presented with this, his senior advisor would recommend that he veto the bill.
Objection?
And I just say, you know, look, I mean, Congress already can rewrite laws. We have reauthorizations, appropriations. We have spending limitations, oversight hearings, investigations, GAO audits and studies, and the Congressional Review Act, just to name a few of the tools at our disposal. And you know, and I wish we would just do our job around here. You know, our whole appropriations process, at least in the House, has collapsed because of the Confederate flag issue. We can't get a transportation bill because my friends can't get people on their side to come to any kind of an agreement on a long-term funding source of a long-term highway bill. The other body last session passed a bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform bill. We can't even bring it up here on the House floor. We can't even pass an AUMF to authorize the wars we're involved in right now. So I would just say that I think, you know, with all due respect, this bill is going nowhere. Regulations are an important subject. We ought to talk about it and figure out, you know, how we can better deal with it, but this is not the answer. And I just think this is filler because we can't get anything else of any substance on the floor here. And I would urge my colleagues to talk to your leadership and tell them that we got to do our work. And people are getting impatient. I have a Republican governor who wants to know why we can't pass a long-term highway bill here. They can't plan for big projects and important projects that are necessary for our economy in Massachusetts to grow unless we get that done. And yet, you know, I'm reading in the papers today that even though the Senate is working on something, the leadership over here says dead on arrival. We only want short terms. Well, I just plead with you, you know, during one of your conferences, you ought to have a conversation about bringing things to the floor that will actually make a difference in people's lives and that will help move this economy forward. And this, unfortunately, isn't it. And appreciate the time and yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Oklahoma, gentleman, Chairman Cole.
Thank you. I'm struck a little bit by my friend's from Massachusetts last remark on transportation bill, because our position is actually the same as the minority leader's position on this, which is a short-term bill. And that's actually where she's at. That's actually where the administration's at. They would like an opportunity to negotiate a longer-term bill. So this is one where actually most of us are in accord. Republicans in the House, the Democratic leader in the House at least, and the President of the United States. It's the Senate that we think we have our difference with. But I want to go quickly to the bill at hand, because there's a couple of points I want to make that go off. And first of all, I want to thank both of you for being here, and I want to thank both of you for your remarks about this, because they both actually to a certain degree reflect what I feel. The frustration on the regulation side is palpable and real. And any district in America, any business person that you talk to at any size business would tell you exactly what Mr. Marino has said, that the number one problem we have is too much regulation, often drawn up by people that, whatever their intentions, are not particularly knowledgeable about the fields that they're regulating. My friend from Georgia, though, makes a good point about the constitutionality and the separation of powers issues. That's a real concern. I come down in favor of the bill, though, because I think, you know, number one, something that we in Congress ought to agree on, and something I agree very much with my friend in Massachusetts on, is that we have given away way too much power here. I think the points he makes about the authorization for use of military force, exactly right. You know, I think we were wrong not to authorize or disapprove what happened in Libya. That's a presidential overreach. But, you know, a lot of times we do this to ourselves. You know, when we wrote Dodd-Frank, you know, we create a Consumer Protection Bureau that we have no power to appropriate money, no way to hold accountable. That was Congress giving away power to the executive branch. the Independent Payment Advisory Board in Obamacare is power, given we don't get to approve who those people are, we don't get to oversee, but they can technically control this. And again, to my friend's point, I agree with him on this. Republican Congress has not brought forward. We're at war in the Middle East. I don't hold the Speaker responsible. He asked the President when he submitted, when he actually began operations, bring that to Congress. Submit an AUF. President waited 8 months, and so but I think we should act. I still believe we should act on that. So sometimes we need to look in the mirror. And number one, see, Congress is a problem here for abdicating responsibility and giving away too much authority to the executive branch. We've done that under Democrats and Republicans. I don't see it as a partisan issue. I see it as a constitutional issue, and one where Congress is happy to assert authority when it wants to, but happy to kick it off when it's a hot potato too. And we've done that routinely. This is a really important point. What I think, the frustration I hear is people that are under the regulation don't know who to hold accountable. They don't have any easy way to get at an unelected, person that's writing the regulation. They can get their hands right around our neck politically if they think we're doing something. And I think that's important. I think that's really fundamental in a democracy, that people feel like the people they elect, number one, have authority, and number two, if they misuse that authority, they can be held accountable. We ought to have to put our fingerprints on these regulations of this magnitude. We ought to have to agree or disagree. Now, there's a variety of ways to do it. I like this particular way of doing it because I think it holds us most accountable. But if my friends have another suggestion, that'd be good. I'm not surprised the administration proposes it. Every president, opposes. They're all happy to expand their authority at the expense of the Congress. What I'm worried about is how often we've been willing to abet that process and participate in it. This is an effort to actually not only regain some of that authority, but to put ourselves in a position where we are held accountable, where the people can really see how we voted on something. Now, some people think, no regulations are important. I don't agree with that. I mean, actually, there are some regulations. We all want clean air. We all want clean water. We all want decent rules of the road, so to speak, in the conducting of business. But some elected element has to be more directly involved in that people can hold accountable when we go too far. And that's really hard to do. This is, I think, a really important effort. Last point I want to make, because I do want to touch on the economic point that my friend from Georgia raised. Actually, the Bush administration did not lose jobs every month. It actually increased jobs. They inherited a recession, which began 6 weeks after he took office. So in other words, he walked into a tough spot. Then he got 9/11. And, we could argue just as clearly that I guess once we had a Democratic Congress and unemployment was under 5%, I guess that must have been responsible for what happened. I don't think so. I don't think economic cycles match up very well with political elections. And we all like to draw that comparison. We certainly do when it's to our advantage. My friends do when it's to their advantage. But I don't think that's what's at stake here. But I do think this regulatory environment that's been created over the last few years is going to make life difficult for the next president, whether that person is Democrat or Republican. Because I do think, as my friend from Pennsylvania suggests, it's a big drag on the economy. It's a huge drag on small businesses. And you're seeing lower business formation rate in a recovery than we've seen before. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and a lower labor participation rate, and companies being, and it is extremely difficult under Dodd-Frank. When you aim at the legislation was to make big banks smaller, instead it's made them bigger. It's made it harder for community banks to finance things. So we just need to look at this across the board, everything from war making to regulations to the traditional powers of Congress with tax. And this is an effort to do that. I want to applaud my friend for bringing it forward. I think my friend on the other side raises legitimate objections, but at the end of the day, Congress needs to hold itself accountable, needs to be put in a position where it is accountable and where the people can hire and fire according to the results that they think that they're dealing with. So With that, I know it's a little bit of a rant, Mr. Chairman, I apologize, but I feel very strongly about this legislation, more strongly about the underlying process, where I see it again, not just in regulation, but I see Congress abandoning authority in war-making, things of that nature, where I'm probably closer to my friend's view on the other side on that. We should be doing these things. That falls on us as a majority. This is an appropriate action for the majority to take. I hope we continue to assert our authority, and frankly, put ourselves in a position where the American people can hold us responsible. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman, Florida, Judge Hastings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that the statement of our colleague Sheila Jackson Lee in support of her amendment be made a part of the record.
Without objection, that'll be in the record.
For purposes
Yes, sir.
of the report, those are there. Mr. Chairman, I'll have an awful lot to say tomorrow, and so I'll forego a lot of my comments. I do have a question of Mr. Marino, and it has to do with two of the three examples that you cited, the one where the person was purchasing an automobile and the other where the bread delivery person left a door open. I sense that a part of the regulation, and I recognize the magnitude of federal regulations, but those situations that you spoke of seem to contemplate some state and local regulations as well. There wasn't a federal inspector, I don't think, that came to the guy's bakery or bread.
Actually, it was OSHA,
OSHA,
yes.
because the door was left open.
And it was just time for an inspection.
Wow.
But primarily because the door was open.
That's
And-
pretty petty on their part.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so we do need regulation. There's
Yeah.
no question about it, but I just continually hear across the country about what regulations have done to business over the past 15, 20 years.
I agree with you with reference to when I came here to Congress in 1992, the talk was and continued for some time about unfunded mandates. I mean, that was the biggie. But what I want to get across is, in addition to the federal government, state agencies as well as local, meaning county subdivisions and cities, also pour on regulations. And I think sometimes when we talk about regulations, we talk as if it's only the federal government that perpetuates them. And I'd just like that to be clearly understood, that a lot of the burden on small businesses. We held the Florida delegation, Congressman Buchanan and I chaired the Florida delegation, and we held a hearing last week where we had the deputy administrator of the Small Business Administration as well as business persons. And all of them alluded to what you're discussing here, some form of regulation. My disagreement with this particular approach is it will add a significant number of activities that we would have to take here in Congress, and we don't seem to be able to do the things we need to do. Therefore, I don't think another 75 or 100 approval or disapproval of regulations is the way for us to approach this. We could go through the appropriations process, the authorization process. We have all sorts of measures of oversight of regulations. But anyway, I just want to point that out. Yes, sir.
Sir, for the record, I agree with you on the regulation at the state and local level. I do have an inordinate amount of complaints come from the state and the locals. It's saying, I have to do this because it's federally mandated.
Yeah.
And look, you give somebody a little authority, and if it's just not the right person, it gets out of control.
Yeah, but have you ever tried to build something on your own property? The federal government doesn't have anything to do with that. I wanted to extend.
I'm going through that right now.
Yeah, I wanted to extend something, and the inspector, I can't seem to coordinate with him about a foot on my property. Now, see, my daddy would have remedied that. He would have built the damn thing and then let them talk about it later on. Anyway, I'll talk to you.
It's like your dad and my dad would resort to the same methods.
I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like my friend from Florida. He and I will have a good time tomorrow on the floor with this. But I tend to agree. I think it's one of those things that people look at. I appreciate Mr. Moreno and Mr. Johnson, of course, from Georgia. And Mr. Moreno, we've worked hard on this. This is something that keeps coming up. And I think it's not a matter of how many times it comes up. I believe good ideas have no shelf life. I think good ideas should be brought up. And if they come up, you try them again. And I think that's what we're doing here. Looking forward to this being on the floor. I think it's a good step. I will save most of my discussion for tomorrow, but I appreciate y'all being here and being a part of this. Mr. Chairman, you're back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a saying in Alabama, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And, you know, a lot of people in America right now feel like they're getting nailed by an overly burdensome regulatory apparatus of the government. Not only are we being nailed economically, I'm glad that we brought that up, but it is getting into our basic individual rights and liberties. And I don't think the founding fathers ever had it in their mind that this government would grow to be as big as it is, nor that it would be as intrusive into the lives of everyday people. Let me offer you an experience that I had when I was on the State Board of Education in Alabama. We came up with something called zero-based regulation. We went through all the regulations that the State Board of Education in Alabama promulgated for school systems, about 4 notebooks that thick. And we went through it chapter by chapter, and we said to the staff of the State Department of Education, show us why we should keep this regulation, or otherwise it's gone. We went from that many notebooks to 1 notebook because they couldn't justify the level of regulations that we were putting on local schools and then expecting the local schools to, you know, have all this wonderful performance. Well, multiply that out across the federal government, and it's the vast expanse of power, whether it's the environment or it's workplace safety. We've now gotten to the point where regulation is no longer appropriate, it's just intrusive. We've got people who've never been elected to anything making decisions about how we live our lives. And I think it's a fundamental violation of our individual rights as citizens of this country that this government has gone so far. So I like this bill. I would go even further, but I think it's a really good step towards getting the government off the backs of the people, maybe making that hammer a good bit smaller and a little bit less forceful in the lives of people here. So I support the bill. Thank you for bringing it forward.
Gentlemen, for the next panel, the gentleman, Mr. Young, my friend from Iowa. I want to welcome you to the committee, David. I recognize you enjoy coming to see us, and we enjoy coming to see you. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this great opportunity, and I do support the underlying bill. I think it's a great bill. But, Mr. Chairman, you talk about unchecked rules and regulations and their abuse out there. We deserve to know a few things about these regs and where they're coming from. Number one, who are the regulators? Who are the regulators? Do they have a self-interest as well? And what data do they use when determining their regulations? Besides Lysol, sunshine, I believe, is the best disinfectant. So let's bring some more sunlight and transparency to this process. I have offered a series of 3 amendments aimed at bringing more sunlight and transparency to the regulatory process. My amendment number 14 would require agencies to publish the names of employees who work on a rulemaking. My amendment number 15 would require any employee working on rulemaking to complete financial disclosure forms under the Ethics in Government Act. And finally, number 16, my amendment would require agencies to publish in the Federal Register a list of the data and studies they have relied upon in their rulemaking and where Americans can find these studies online. As we've seen time and time again, these agency rulemakings can have a far-ranging effect on American small businesses, our economy, our rights. I believe Americans deserve to know who is working on these rules, what information they are relying on, and if they have any conflicts of interest or stand to gain monetarily from a rulemaking they are working on. I believe that these are reforms both sides of the aisle should be able to support. These reporting requirements would apply to both Democrat and Republican administrations, and I believe they will remove the veneer of secrecy that adds to the controversy of some of the more hotly debated rulemakings. I respectfully ask that the committee makes in order these amendments so we can take these common sense steps to improve the integrity and transparency of the federal rulemaking process. Specifically on the amendment number 14. Mr. Cole, who was here, talked about fingerprints on these rules. Well, it's hard to find fingerprints if you also don't even know the names of the people who are writing these rules and regulations. These rules and regulations essentially have the same effect as law. Shouldn't we know who are writing these rules and regs, where they're coming from? Members have to put their name on the bills and amendments they offer. These rules and regs affect Americans, and Americans deserve some transparency to know who these people are. Iowans ask me all the time, who are these people writing these rules and regulations? Do they have any real-world knowledge of what they are writing these rules and regs on? Do they have any background in this? Do they have any credibility, experience in this? Do they have a bias, perhaps, from a former life as an advocate with a political agenda, perhaps? My amendment number 15 regards these rulemakers to do a financial disclosure report, just like we do, just like our senior staff does, all for the same reasons. Conflicts of interest, perhaps. Transparency and accountability is needed up and down the line. My final amendment, number 16, it seeks to make the data and science behind these rules available to the public. Americans should have access to the science and data determining rules and regs, as the regulators do, so we can all be on the same page when we debate these issues, refer to the sources, refer to the science, and it would be online access for everyone. I believe these are really common sense rules, our amendments here regarding rules and rulemaking. And I would respectfully ask for the support of the committee for these. Thank you very much, Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
thank the gentleman for his testimony. In fact, I believe lots of times it's not a lost viewpoint when people say, who the heck did this? You kind of want to know what organization, but I think it ought to be who did this? How was it actually done? And I think that openness in some respects would be a good thing, but I think what would be better is if we had sound science behind it, and if we really did have somebody who stood up and understood what the heck they were doing and were honest about the impact. So I think what you're doing here today is of great benefit, and I want to thank you very much for being here. Mr. Woodall? I have no questions. Is there any Democrat that has a question? I see none. Thank you very much. I appreciate the comments, gentlemen. Is there any Republican that seeks to engage the gentleman? The gentleman from Georgia is seeking time. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to thank the gentleman for coming. I think transparency and knowing where this is coming from and how it comes about is something. On another note, there's legislation that I have that deals with consent decrees. That's a whole different issue. It's a sue and settle piece, and it all goes back to just being transparent with the American people and knowing where it comes from. I'm not one that says all regulation is bad. In fact, regulation plays a part. It's a matter of just having it in its proper place. And your amendments address that. I appreciate that, and I just want to thank you for coming, being a part.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Young, thank you very much for being here. I hope you all picked up some good rain in Iowa. Every time I'm there, it seems to rain.
I hit 6 county fairs, so I had a lot of corn
Love
dogs,
that.
too.
Love that. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking time to be
Thank you,
here.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Is there any other member of this that seeks time on this bill? Seeing none, this now closes the hearing portion of H.R. 427, and the chairman would now defer for just one moment. I've been advised by our awesome Staff Director, that we are about 15 minutes away from being able to finalize our work. And so what I'd like to do is to note that it's about 10 minutes of 6 right now. With about 15 minutes, we should have our work done. So I would call the committee back at 6:15, which is 15 minutes before we'd have votes, with the understanding that we try and get things done. Gentleman from Colorado.
Mr. Chairman, can I inquire as to the schedule for the committee for the rest of the week?
Yes, the gentleman may inquire.
I'd like to submit such an inquiry.
The Rules Committee is scheduled to meet tomorrow, that's Tuesday, at 3 o'clock to consider the Veterans Administration Accountability Bill.
Okay, are there any plans to consider a highway transportation bill?
You know, I'll be very honest with you this afternoon. I'd understood the Senate was still trying to gain cloture. Does anybody have new information about that process? In the Senate?
We're waiting for
Our
them.
friends and colleagues in the Senate. Excuse me just a moment, please. So I've been advised that they anticipate that that will be later this evening, so I guarantee this will be a great question tomorrow.
Very good.
I don't know the answer right now, but they've been trying to gain cloture over the weekend and working closely together, and just admire our colleagues so much over there for the great work they're doing.
Wonderful. Well, we'll look forward to inquiring tomorrow, and we all know more, and we'll see everybody soon.
Good, thank you very much. The Rules Committee will now be in recess, subject to call of the chair until 6:15 p.m. committee will come to order. It's now 6:15, and I want to thank you for coming back to the Rules Committee. The committee has taken a few minutes off. The gentleman from Georgia will now have the motion for us. Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 427, the regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny Act of 2015, a structured rule. The rule provides for 1 hour of general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule makes an order as original text for the purpose of amendment, the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on the Judiciary, now printed in the bill, modified by the amendment printed in Part A of the Rules Committee report, and provides that it shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against that amendment in the nature of a substitute. The rule makes an order only those further amendments printed in Part B of the report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for the division of a question. The rule waives all points of order against amendments printed in Part B of the report. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2 of the rule provides that on any legislative day during the period from July 30th, 2015 through September 7, 2015, the journal of the proceedings of the previous day shall be considered as approved, and the chair may at any time declare the House adjourned to meet at a date and time to be announced by the chair in declaring the adjournment. Section 3 of the rule provides that the Speaker may appoint members to perform the duties of the chair for the duration of the period addressed by Section 2. Section 4 of the rule provides that each day during the period addressed by Section 2 of the resolution shall not constitute a calendar day for the purposes of Section 7 of the War Powers Resolution. Section 5 of the rule provides that each day during the period addressed by Section 2 of the resolution shall not constitute a legislative day for purposes of Clause 7 of Rule 13. Section 6 of the rule provides that it shall be in order at any time on the legislative day of July 30th, 2015, for the Speaker to entertain motions that the House suspend the rules as though under Clause 1 of Rule 15, and that the Speaker or his designee shall consult with the minority leader or her designee on the designation of any matter for consideration pursuant to this section. Section 7 of the rule waives the requirement of Clause 6A of Rule 13 for a two-thirds vote to consider a report from the Committee on Rules on the same day it was presented to the House with respect to any resolution reported through the legislative day of July 30th, 2015. Finally, Section 8 of the rule addresses access to the chamber for the joint meeting to be held on September 24th, 2015.
A discussion of that motion. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the gentleman from Georgia. And just concerning this rule, on H.R. 427, the rule provides for consideration of H.R. 427 under a structured amendment process. The rule makes in order 10 amendments, 7 of which are from Democratic sponsors. The rule also provides the normal management authority for the Speaker during the long district work period. It also provides for consideration of bills under suspension and same-day authority through Thursday of this week. This is to provide the House with maximum flexibility to address highways and other critical matters before the district work period, and is not unusual before a long recess. Lastly, the rule also contains a provision addressing access to the floor during the September 24th joint meeting of Congress. This rule provides for swift consideration of the bill and deserves everyone's support, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. You've now heard the motion and the gentleman from Georgia's discussion. Is there further amendment or discussion? The gentleman from Massachusetts
Chairman, I
recognized.
have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee grant H.R. 427 an open rule so that all members have the opportunity to offer amendments to the bill on the floor.
Thank you very much. Discussion or further amendment on this? No discussion. The vote will now be on the amendment from the gentleman from Massachusetts. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Noes have it, noes have it. Further amendment or discussion? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion from the gentleman from Georgia. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Ayes have it, ayes have it.
Chairman, I ask for a roll call.
Gentleman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox? Aye. Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Cole? Aye. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall? Aye. Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins, aye. Mr. Byrne? Aye. Mr. Byrne, aye. Mr. Newhouse? Aye. Mr. Newhouse, aye. Ms. Slaughter? Mr. McGovern?
No.
Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings? No. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis? Mr. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
8 yeas, 3 nays.
Motion is agreed to, motion is agreed to. And the gentleman, Mr. Collins, will be the Republican manager.
And Mr. Hastings of Florida.
Mr. Hastings from Florida, as we earlier heard. Thank you very much. The Rules Committee is scheduled to meet, as we had previously talked about, at 3 o'clock tomorrow to consider Veterans Administration Accountability Bill, and we will further look for anything that comes from the United States Senate. I want to thank each of you for being here today. This finishes our committee work for the day.